So today's lecture, as we all know, is about world creation and character development. So for our agenda, we're going to go quickly through the pitch deck components addressed last week as a refresher for people who were there, and as a framework for today's session for those who were not there. Go through a few key terms, which I'll just go through right now, actually, because they come up a lot. I want to make sure that it's clear to the audience. The difference between development and production. So first off, development has multiple phases. There's a development when you have a show, an idea, and you're trying to get your pitch deck ready to market. So that's kind of early development, was development. Then there's the additional development that happens once you have a deal, either with a studio or a broadcaster, where there's some money and some funds coming into that development. And then honestly, once a show is in production, development happens along the way. How do you expand it for the next series? For the next season, what else needs to happen in it? So, and production is when you're actually making the show to be aired. You have financing, you have a budget, you have a team of animators and a team of writers. So development is kind of the think tank, and production is really the boots on the ground. And then the other set of terms I want to make sure that you knew is that we keep referring to this as a pitch deck. What are you initially going out with to market? So the pitch deck is also sometimes referred to as a Bible, sometimes referred to as a mini Bible. They're all the same thing. But then as a separate thing, there's also a show Bible. So this is a much more extensive, deeper dive into the components of the show and the characters of the show and the world of the show. So that a lot of what needs to be handled for your pitch deck or your Bible or your mini Bible are show Bible components. But the earlier in the process you really dive into these things, the better, the more clear, the more you are going to know your show for your pitch deck. Even if your pitch deck is only 10, 15 pages and a show Bible could be 50 pages, is right. It'll be a synthesizing of your show Bible. So those are kind of the distinctions. Show Bible is what you make for a show that's already essentially been funded for development and or production. A pitch deck or a Bible or a mini Bible is what you're doing to try to market yourself. And that's what we were focusing on last week. Then we'll get into world creation. What is a world? How to make yours unique and expandable. And Caroline and Andrew have some great experience and stories on this. And lastly, we'll dive into character development. What makes for strong, lasting, fresh characters? And how will you get audience to actually be attached and engaged and invested in yours? That's how characters stand the test of time. And you think of Charlie Brown, or you think of Fred Flintstone, you think of these characters that have gone on for generations and generations. So how do you have your audience have that level of affinity for yours? So quickly for this pitch deck overview, your pitch deck components are your title poster, which will have your title, your characters, your tagline, and be very clear what your show is. Is it preschool? Is it primetime? Is it mixed audience? What's the length of your show, and any key partners? You'll have your overview, which is like your one sheet. It's a quick intro to your characters, to your stories, to your world, to any learns that's in there, but it's a quick one pager. Then we have world and characters, and in your pitch deck, it's in this order. So world and characters are what we're going to take the deep dive into today. Next week, we'll take our deeper dive into show structure and its key elements and sustainable stories and episodes. So those next two will be for next week. Curriculum we'll touch on kind of as we go. That depends on age group and broadcaster. It is not always required. Transmedia and toys, again, depends on kind of what kind of show you have where that's required. And then you have your contact information, which is really kind of your last final, hey, this is me, this is my brand, this is my show. Okay, so today, right now, we'll hit world and then we'll hit characters.
There he is.
Take it away, my friends.
There he is. Well.
So this is Ranger Rob. This is a really good picture of Ranger Rob because it shows all the elements that we sort of worked on putting in the show. And just a little bit about the history between Andrew and I. This is sort of how we really got to know each other, right, Andrew? We've been working together as writers on other shows, but they kind of threw us together on this show, and we didn't realize that we had a lot in common. We both like interior design, and we both like cheesy musicals. So we knew it was a lifelong, pretty much, partnership here. So right, so they started it. Alex Barr had an idea about a ranger, a young ranger in training, which you can see there, and it was basically from there we grew it from there, right, Andrew? We kind of
that's right. So Alexander Barr, for anyone who doesn't know, he created a show called Lunar Gym, which was his first show, which Canada UK co-production, and his second show was Mike the Knight, and that was a huge hit, ran multiple seasons. I had the pleasure of being a voice on that. I'm also a voice actor. And that won an international Emmy in the best preschool category. So he was quite hot when he pitched this idea to Nelvana for Ranger Rob, and it existed as a very lean, just top line concept about a boy ranger. Or a boy ranger in trainings to be determined, who lived with his parents in a North American forest. And it was really all about...
Oh, sorry, I broke in. I was just going to point. I'm pointing to the screen, not knowing people can't see where I'm.
Where should I point?
Yeah, if you go to the very left, just to break in and show, that's his clubhouse, his treehouse, their park ranger. What did we call that?
That's the Ranger Tower and Rob's Ranger Tower. But we just, but that wasn't even part of the initial pitch. That when we came in, it was just this very lean 5-page PDF, really describing just the boy ranger and the North American setting. And this is where it really started to get exciting. So we then sat down which is where you start with these things when you're brought aboard to develop a show with a company. We started off just brainstorming in a room with a bunch of whiteboards where we wrote down, what is the show? What is the show not? Who do we see in the show? We have a boy ranger.
What other kids are we going to see? And what's kid relatable and all that kind of stuff. What's the world too?
And what's the world? And when we got to what's the world, we all quickly realized that if it's just set in a North American forest, particular for this show, if it's just set in the North American forest, maybe that's not enough. Maybe we should, maybe to generate stories, maybe our world needs to expand. And we came up with the idea with the group of turning it into a park called Big Sky Park, that represents all of the world's ecozones in one exciting location.
Right. And what that does is it allows the story generation to just pop out of nowhere. So if you are in a forest, you can do a story about a raccoon. If you're in the jungle, about monkeys. It just expands the story generation, expands the world, the relatability to the viewers too, because they can see where they come from. Oh, I'm from here. I'm from here. So it's really good to keep in mind to help the viewer see themselves reflected in the world. And if you can't, then make it very aspirational. This is somewhere I really want to go. I want to be on that monorail. I want to be on the top of those mountains or on the fun slides. So we have water slides and things like that. So that's where, when Andrew was saying we expanded it, it really opened up the show for us, didn't it? Before it was just a ranger in the forest. Now he could go anywhere and see anybody. And it was, I think that's when we knew that we had a show.
That's right. And we should say that even though we're describing here the process of creating a show that is with a studio, these are the kind of questions you have to ask yourself when you're developing a show, because you want to have, when you're developing a show by yourself. Carolyn and I right now are working on 2 different shows that we're dreaming up. And so we've done this enough now that we know the questions we need to ask. We know what our world needs to have in it. And that has been learned kind of in the field and by watching a lot of shows and by working on a lot of shows.
Right.
So with that, if I could interrupt for 1 second. So Andrew, you just said, the questions that you need to ask. Mm-hmm. Do you have like a cheat sheet, a quick, hey, here are the top 5 questions?
Well, they're all the things. They're all the things we'll touch on. But for example, world, it has to have a lot of opportunity for action, and it has to be, as Carolyn said, very aspirational and a place a kid is going to want to hang out. And you're going to want to hang out in a writer, because hopefully you're going to be writing this show for years and years.
And the relatability is really good, even though, you know, not very many people get to live in a really cool ranger tower. He's got a clubhouse, his own little room that's got a hammock and all kinds of things. So that's like the kids' room, just really amped up to be a kid's most favorite room they could ever imagine being in. So that's what we kind of do, relatability, making sure there's something for everyone, aspiration, all that kind of thing we put into it for world, for sure.
And and we'll move to the next slide in 1 second, but because we had this park with all these eco zones in it, we thought, okay, well, we need a quick way to get around that park. How are we going to do that? That gave birth to the monorail that you see on the crest in the center.
Who doesn't like a monorail?
Yeah, park visitors ride around on it. And we've had episodes where elephants wind up mistakenly on the monorail and get moved from the jungle to the Arctic. And
yeah,
it's very Canada Winter Olympics, right?
Right.
Vancouver made one especially for the Olympics.
That's right. That's true. Little known fact.
Only Canadians know it.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
And in that original pitch too, when it was just that very lean PDF, other characters didn't exist, and we'll get in this discussion to how we came up with Stomper, who is Rob's best friend Yeti buddy, who is over there on the right side, and Dakota, who is his other best friend, who's swinging in on the vine there, and the vehicle underneath them, that's Chipper, and that's a robotic AI vehicle that is also a character in the show. So all that stuff we came up with as kind of story drivers, and how are we going to make this world exciting and dynamic?
And just to add to that too, I just wanted to say that when you talk about Dakota, she's from the jungle swinging in on that vine. And Stomper is from what we call the frosty fields, which is really the Arctic. Rob is, of course, from the forest. And then we have a cute little preschooler named Sam, who is from the desert. So they're kind of the little experts in those zones, and we can see them in those zones. And it's kind of nice to hear a kid's view of their homeland, right? So this is where I'm from. And so they always are able to give the information that maybe Rob wouldn't know about the desert, or Rob wouldn't know about the frosty field. So
it empowers each friend. And that's kind of, that's something that you really want on that list of questions. You want your characters, and I know we're jumping into characters here a little bit, but you want your characters to be empowered characters, to be very strong in who they are. They're going to have flaws, of course. They're going to have funny foibles and things, but they have to bring strength and bring positive to the picture.
Right.
Sure. And I know that we keep touching on you having developed this and adapted this show, but not be the creators, Alexander Barr being the creator. And most of the people in this audience are either creators from the writing side or from the art side. And just to be very clear, that once you have a hit show or two, you can be like Alexander Barr and walk in with a PDF to your buddies at the network. But as the information that you're getting from Carolyn and Andrew really goes along the lines of the level of detail that I think most of us as relatively new-ish creators would need to have put in. So this is great. And they, again, as they mentioned, they are both also creators of their own shows. So kind of look at it through the creator lens, not as them kind of developing this for, as boots on the ground for Alexander Barr and for the actual network. But these are the principles to put into your very own deck.
Right. For everything you do, you should go through all these kinds of things to make sure that it's a full show, even when you're just pitching it, because they might ask you one question that you hadn't really worked out, and they want to know that you know the world and the characters as best as well, better than anyone, because it's your vision. So that's why we go through, Andrew and I, no matter if it's for somebody else or for our own, it's all the same kind of process, making sure we know exactly what show we want to make. And it's going to change along the way, but as long as you know what your vision is at the beginning and can have something to showcase for that, then you're on your way. I think then you know that you've got a show, and you can people will get it. So let's see a next one. How about this? Just complete different kind of show for sure. Andrew and I worked on this one as well. This is called Truck Town, and it's about trucks that are just basically kids, and they make games up for any problem they run into. So if you look at this world, and you look at even the title, Truck Town, see how it's all dirty and banged up. And that's basically what we wanted the world to look like in this. These are trucks. These are, they're dirty, they're grimy, they're greasy. It's set in a junkyard. There's highways, there's roads. And so you wouldn't think that's relatable to kids, but in fact, we were working on making it as relatable to kids as possible. So we look at it as simulating the kids' playground. So instead of playing in a sandbox, the trucks play in a gravel pit. Instead of being in the playground, they're in the junkyard. And see this, this sort of half structure on the right there is a boat, like a half broken down boat in the junkyard. And I love that, because so many times in the playground, there will be a simulated boat that they can climb up. So we kept this world as dirty and fun in that way as possible. And when we look at play patterns of kids, there's certain kids that just love being rough and tumble. They love getting in the sandbox and getting dirty. This show is for the kids that come home completely dirty from top to bottom. That's the kids that love Truck Town, and that's what we were playing for, to make sure they related to it. Just don't worry about wiping up after coming out of a sandbox. Just go back in it and get dirtier. That's sort of what our thought was with this. So you can see the world being very different, but very sort of kid relatable. And kids love trucks too, so that doesn't help. That doesn't hurt.
And then
Carolyn, do you want to take a second and show us the book that this is based off? Do you have it handy?
Yes, I do have this.
Truck Town is a book-based property.
This is a book by John Cheska. He's got a series of these, and this is my favorite one because it's called Truckery Rhymes. Can you see that? Yeah, which is like nursery rhymes, obviously. And everything is a truck. Everything is lug nuts and bolts and all those kinds of things. Fire trucks. Here, I'll show you. This is basically our show, a truck banging through a wall of bricks, because kids love that. They love building towers and then breaking them down and smashing them. So we didn't shy away from any of that smash and tumble and all that kind of stuff that real younger kids love to do. And
physical was really the order of the day for Truck Town, wasn't it? It was very physical.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a boys' action for sure, but we had girl characters too, and I think it appealed to them as well. So this is this world, and you'll see Andrew's show coming up, completely different. This was not dirty at all. This was like a beautiful picture book. Look at the difference in the worlds.
So this here is called The Remarkable Mr. King, and it's based on a book series too, called Just Mr. King, a series of 3 books aimed at the very, very young. The books were incredibly simple, very short sentences, very thin books by Geneviève Côté, an author-illustrator from Montreal. And so we had Mr. King, he was in the book, and he had some friends, and those are the friends over there. And they barely said anything, and you really the book didn't suggest kind of their personalities or anything. There wasn't room in it as a book medium. But for TV, we had to come up with those characters, and we had to come up with that world. So you can see from this graphic that he also lives in a forest, like రైంజర్ Rob. The challenge for TV was, what can we do to make that forest aspirational, like Carolyn has been saying, and special? What's going to make it special and stand out from just a regular forest? And in our discussions, brainstorming, and I'll just as a sidebar here say, collaboration is so important in this business. If you've got people who are, who as you're coming up with your pitches, talk to other people, don't and ask them what they think, and hear how engaging, if an idea is engaging, or if they find it appealing, because that information is absolutely vital to you when you're going out and pitching it. Absolutely. So what we came up for the forest was, we settled on it being a very, very whimsical place where flowers can just suddenly pop up in an instant, and a blanket of snow will drop in a sudden blink. And if Mr. King wants to turn day to night, he can just put a ladder up to the sun and hang a big set of curtains in front of it and close the curtains, and now it's nighttime. So that was the language of our show. That our whole world turned around whimsy, and that came out of those discussions.
And I love the white background.
Yeah, that was definitely an aesthetic in the book, and we decided to preserve that. Jeff Astolfo, the director of Mr. King, really wanted to preserve that, and it was great for the young audience because, as I say, it's aimed at the very young. So the visual on screen for this series is very, very simple, and you're very focused on the characters and what they're saying and doing, and there's not a whole lot of background noise going on with action and clutter. So white space it turned out to be a real design aesthetic for this property, suggested by the books and translated into the TV series.
Nice. That's really great. And I think that kids, did you think of a coloring book with this? Because
it'd be a great idea, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Because they might recognize all those space, in coloring books.
Yeah.
I wonder if that also was an appeal for the kid viewers as well with this.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is next? I guess there's different kinds of worlds. I guess none of us have heard of this show. It's
what is this?
Yeah, it's not very well known at all. It's not even in the late. I always think it's funny when the late night comedians are mentioning Paw Patrol. I'm like, can it be Ranger Rob? Anyway,
it will be.
It will be. Yes, it will be. 132 episodes later, it will be. It will just have to get to them. Paw Patrol is a boys' action. Again, a rescue, and it also has a world where it emulates a town, and it's very recognizable. And I think they did a great job of that. And they didn't. It was an aspirational, recognizable town, and the pups, which of course, what a great idea to have really cute puppies be rescue guys. And they're aspirational because they're doing what kids can't really do themselves. And that's a big part of preschool as well, to imagine what you can do because you're so used to not being able to do what your big brother is doing, or you're waiting to be able to get those shoelaces tied up by yourself. So that's what's really great about rescue shows. So we were just going to touch on this because this isn't our show. I did work on the first season. But Ranger Rob was calling, so I moved over there and worked with Andrew. But I was just a writer on Paw Patrol, and it was quite interesting to see the evolution of that show and how it did take a little while before it took off, and then it just really took off with all these elements. I think is what made it so appealing to the viewers.
Yeah, for sure. And Caroline, you and Andrew have mentioned a couple of times boy action shows. I'm wondering if we could take a second to go into kind of the different genres or categories that shows tend to fall into, so that the audience can know kind of what are the different boxes they could be aiming for.
Sure. So let's start at the super young end of the spectrum. Mr. King would be an example of that. The pacing is very slow. It's about the characters. It's about what the characters are experiencing. It's very simple, and simple is hard. It really is hard. There's nothing to hide behind. Yeah, nothing to hide behind was simple at all. Yeah. Like the episodes for Mr. King were 7-minute episodes, and really a challenge to come up with a balanced, full feeling story in 7 minutes. Because most stories have a way of expanding, and so reining that in and coming up with those shows, it was a really great exercise. It was really tough. So that's the very young end of the spectrum. Then you would have,
I guess you would have, so in another good example of that, I was going to say, is Max and Ruby is in Mr. King, because it looks very simple, but I think it's a very hard show to write because it's so exact in such a small period of time. But then you have Boys Action, which is Truck Town, and that also goes with Paw Patrol, also goes with Super Wings, which is the next slide, I think. Yeah. You can have also Girls Action, and which would be not Doc McStuffin, I would say. I'm trying to think of the Nick show where there's glitter and can't remember right now. But
well, little charmers would be
yeah. And there's all kinds of you know, the boys action and the girls action, they still have similar elements, and the girls action have a little bit more I would say there's usually a trio instead of a singular hero, but that's changing. And same idea where they're exploring friendships but having lots of action.
Yep.
So,
and if you're going to be moving, if your pitch is sort of leaning towards an action show, a safe place to be, and it's kind of a way, because you're always a little bit concerned about peril for the young viewer, and or for the young character involved in the show. So if it's a boy or a girl who's in a perilous situation, they need an adult stand-in to be present. So in Ranger Rob, we came up with Chipper, who is Rob's vehicle. Who is the AI vehicle. So his parents aren't really in the show, but Chipper is there, and Chipper is there to keep Rob safe and to do the things that Rob physically can't do because he's a young kid. In Super Wings, these robotic planes, and this Super Wings is a beautiful world because it's the whole world that series is set in. And I, along with my writing partner Hugh Duffy, we run the writing on Super Wings. And it is just an absolutely beautiful show to work in, because not only is it the whole world, but you've got some great messaging in that show. It's for kids to experience other cultures, to celebrate other customs, learn other languages. Yeah. There's always a new word in it from the foreign country that they're visiting.
And so oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so it's the planes, the robotic planes in Super Wings that do the really kind of what you would call dangerous stuff. You know, they're the ones that fly into the mouth of the volcano and rescue the amulet that got dropped in by accident. You don't have the child doing that.
Right. And you touched on something there too, which is another type of show, which is curriculum shows. Yeah. And that you can go straight. Education, this is the math show. Andrew and I both worked on Monster Math. Was terrible for me. I just could not handle it.
It wasn't. You were great on it. Come on.
Don't make me do
this
math.
This is Carolyn. No. She's terribly modest.
But this one, this modesty is actually 100% accurate, but or deserved, because I just couldn't handle that show because I couldn't get the math and then break it down so that I could make other people understand what I was doing. Never mind. So in any case, there are those educational shows that are straight up education. And then there's different kind of curriculums in Ranger Rob. There's a nature learn, so you learn about animals or fossils or different kinds of plants. Or there's a pro-social learn, which is usually in most shows, which is about friendship, teamwork, expectations, things that you want to teach your child just on a pro-social level. And then I would say, when you're talking about Super Wings, what a beautiful curriculum, because you're learning about all the different cultures. It's like you get to go on a travel show, but it's entertaining with a story for kids. Right? You get to see all those different places.
Have they gone to Israel yet?
On Super Wings, you know where that's coming. So okay. Yes, it
Where
is.
Are they going? The Dead Sea? Floater planes?
Can't say.
Can't say. Is it coming up this season?
I just had to add that because as a huge fan of Super Wings.
Oh, thank you.
Israel hasn't been there yet, but
that's right. No, it's very much there have been several stories that have been, you know, they've got to get through the pitching machine, and they've got to get sort of to the levels of like, yes, we can do this, it's achievable, and boy, that's coming.
Well, you could do my father's joke where they see who killed the Dead Sea, you know. But that's probably not good for the age group, so that will leave that aside for the curriculum. Sorry. Okay.
You could put it in somewhere for the co-viewer.
That's right.
He's writing it down.
Yes, right. All right. So I think the next slide is showing us the map, if I'm right. Oh, good.
There we go.
So, this is what Andrew and I, on the first season of Ranger Rob in development, our director at the time, Adrian Thatcher, he drew up this simple map, which is actually so helpful, and we have used it till, you know, third season, 132 episodes later, we're still referring to this map. And Andrew, do you want to walk them through the places?
Yeah, sure. So this came about through our whiteboard discussion with Alexander Barr and Adrian Thatcher, Carol and myself, the creative producer, and just thinking of what are we going to do to expand this world. So we start up at 12 o'clock there. Snowy Mountains, they were called at the time. That was our Arctic zone. It then became called the Frosty Fields. Going down clockwise, we get to the North American forest. And kind of interesting to look at that and think that was the beginning of the show, and look how that world expanded. And that was through these wonderfully collaborative, creative discussions that we had. And each zone has kind of its own special features. So in the North American forest, we have Rob's house there at the center. That's the Ranger Tower. We have an evergreen field. We have a geyser field coming down here around coming to 4 o'clock. And then below, we're sort of transitioning now into the jungle with natural jungle slides. Dakota's house. Dakota was swinging in that vine earlier and dressed in the purple. That's where she lives. And there's a lake there in the jungle. And then there's the jungle hills. Then we're transitioning up at 9 o'clock there to the savanna grasslands, where we have gazelles and we have kangaroos and we've got all kinds of fun animals that would be local to that environment. And then we're into the desert with a gorge, with hoodoos, with Sam's house, with an oasis where all kinds of shenanigans happen. And then back up about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, we're at an ice flow back into the frosty fields.
So many things that we could do. When you're doing so many episodes, one season is 52. And even when you're pitching your show, you need to show them that you can sustain a long running series, because everybody wants their series to go for ever and ever. Hello, Paw Patrol.
Yeah.
And so you have to convince them, and also for your own ease, know that you have places to go and things to do, business. You can go here. Like, my favorite thing is having my characters shot out of the geyser field, or you can catapult them from one end to the other. And what's great about this map and knowing your world is you do have to know how it goes together and how it's linked, because kids remember that. Kids remember, hey, wasn't the geysers right beside the forest?
Yeah, they will tell you your world. They'll know it better than you will.
And you cannot cheat. So you need to know this, and you have to have it kind of in your head. And that's why it's important, even if it's a house. And I'll show you, actually. I've got these. In a house, let's say your show is like the show we'll be talking about in a minute, Agent Binky. It's only in a house, and yet look at the specificity, the absolute details that the director did. It's like it really is a floor plan. You have to be an architect practically to be a director of animation, because constantly, I mean, I have it on my board behind me because I have to look constantly. If I'm going to have some business between a cat and a dog, and that I want them to bang into a table and a lamp fall on his head, I got to know where that is. And it's in the hallway by the living room. It's not by the dining room, whatever. And again, like I say, the kids are going to remember. And also just logically, you have to know where everything is and make sure it has a flow. So that's why we wanted to show you the map, because we just thought it was funny that we still use it. And it's expanded since then. Our new director, Derek Prout, has made an ocean around it. And so we have 4 beaches. We have a jungle beach, like a beach in every zone. So that allowed a new character, Marina, who had a boat. And so your show is constantly evolving, and you see how the world and the characters are linked together. They're really connected. One helps the other.
Mm-hmm.
So
and by having these different eco zones, also our learns expanded too. So we're not just learning about animals, because Carolyn touched on, our soft curriculum on Ranger Rob is the nature learn, but it isn't just necessarily animals. It can also be about geological features. It can be about stalagmites and stalactites in caves, or volcanoes, or what have you. So that really opened up, again, the world of possibility, and how we could really make the most of our world.
And one thing that you mentioned yesterday, I don't know if you want to get into it for a second, is that the map was a great foundation, but how you connected it there's a layer on top of it. If you want to talk a second about the zip lines and the monorails and the other components that make this world so robust and so fun and so
exactly
fast.
that was adding action to it. So we've got this great world, and then how do you get around it? So that monorail that we saw in the first crest there's a monorail that links everything. Rob has Chipper, his vehicle. He can zoom anywhere in Big Sky Park in it. Then what are the
he can fly, he can boat,
yep.
he can, yeah.
And then we have solar copters and wind speeders and that are in the desert and zip lines, as you mentioned, Anne-Marie, that are in various locations. So it's it's like you say, robust and action-packed possibilities.
Right, and full of aspiration again, because who doesn't want to go on a zip line if you're a kid?
Yeah.
All those kind of things, you just serve that up in great amounts so they can really enjoy when they turn it on and see how they can imagine themselves doing it. So that's what we love. Here's Harry. This is a show that Andrew was a voice on, right? You weren't a writer, you were a voice on this one. Okay, so I'll tell them. The little tiny little pterodactyl in the corner there, that was Andrew.
And he sounds like this. Hello, Animation Israel. It's so nice to be here.
Love you, Andrew. You're great.
Oh my God. And I'm going to like pop a vein doing that. But Harry.
So funny.
But Harry is a type of, Harry is a portal show, right? Anne-Marie, you were calling it a portal show yesterday, which is another type of show where you have a show that begins and ends in the real world, and then your lead character goes into an imaginary world for the bulk of the adventure. So in the case of Harry, a little illustration of how that show worked is real world boy. Say the episode is about Harry doesn't want to try a new food. He's looking at it. He doesn't want to try it. He thinks he won't like it. And this little bucket of dinosaurs, and these are Harry's buddies are these dinosaurs. They're plastic dinosaurs. They come to life, and they call him to Dino World. They pop up out of the bucket, and they say, "Harry, you got to come to Dino World. We got a problem." And Harry he forgets about his real world problem, and he dives into the bucket, and he has an adventure which mirrors the problem that Harry had in the real world. So remember I said Harry didn't want to try a new food? Well, say in this adventure in Dino World, maybe Terrence, this little pterodactyl, doesn't want to ride a bike. He thinks he won't like riding a bike. He's not going to try it. And through the adventure, Terrence winds up not only finding out he loves riding a bike, he absolutely loves riding a bike. And Harry takes that learn back with him into the real world. And he looks at this food he wasn't going to try, and he realizes, well, it's like Terrence. Terrence didn't want to ride the bike until he tried it. Then he loved it. Okay, I'll try that food, and he tries it, and he loves it.
So it's a nice. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go.
Oh, I was going to say what's great about that is you've got two worlds. You've got Harry's real world, which is usually you see his bedroom when he's going to bed at night. Often I was a big fan of Harry because my daughter loved it. And you see this fantastical world, which is Dino World. So you've got the relatability for the viewers, and then you've got the aspirational, oh, wow, I get to go to a whole world with dinosaurs. And my little buddies are actually full size. The Terrence there, Andrew's character, was flying around in real, whereas in the bucket at home, he's just his little play guys. So it's such an ingenious way to deal with the learn that you talked about, Andrew, of being picky or being afraid to try something, and putting it in a great world where the kids can just watch. And
it's full of imagination too, and it's playful. Playful is a key thing. That is key. Yeah. Keep your world playful, so that you've got loads of opportunity for fun and play and silliness.
Right, exactly. And so another portal show that I think you wrote on is Just in Time, right, Andrew?
Yep.
In Time. You weren't a character in this, unfortunately.
I wasn't a voice on this, but I did.
Darn it, because we wanted more of your impression. So
I did write on this show, and the poster. This poster is like illustrative of a couple of cool things. One, Justin's got a buddy So like Rob has a buddy in Stomper, and Harry's got a buddy in all the dinosaurs. Justin's got a buddy, this little blob of clay there. His name is Squidgy, and he's a blob of clay that could form into any shape or anything required. So again, fun, silly, imaginative. And Justin is a real world boy. He has a real world problem. Say, for example, he's in his bedroom and he's trying to build a blocks tower and it keeps falling over because he's putting all the blocks in a higgledy-piggledy manner. And he wishes he could have this, like, build the tallest tower in the world. And suddenly the skyscrapers of New York City in the 1920s come thundering up around him, and he finds himself transported to New York City. And in New York City is Olive, and that's Olive down there in the green shirt. And she was always treated as the local expert. So like Carolyn was saying in Ranger Rob, we've got Sam who lives in the desert and Stomper who lives in the frosty fields as our local experts. Olive was a global local expert. She'd show up, she was his imaginary friend. And she'd show up in any world where Justin visited, and any world and any time, because it was also set in history, just in time. She'd have the knowledge, whatever knowledge Justin needed, she knew it, she could impart it to him.
Right. And she was a great conceit because no matter what, it was so fun to watch. When is Olive going to show up? And she could be dressed in medieval times, or she could, as you said, be the foreman of the skyscraper and the construction crew. So,
yeah, in that episode, she showed up in a hard hat driving a bulldozer, you know.
So cool and so empowering for a girl too. So this was a great way to get a character friend in a different way. I don't know if it's ever been done. Whereas the dinos went with him in Harry and went to the dino world with him. And the difference between these two, just to give you a quick idea about, not that we have to worry about budget when we're creating, but the beauty of Harry is that there's one world that has to be created, and that's always a good thing for budget. So anytime they go to dino world, they are able to go back and forth. They can go there. They don't have to build new sets. Here they are in Dino World. This is where the pond is. This is where the forest is. It's all built in just in time. A huge budget must have had to be done. We talked about this yesterday, me and Andrew and Anne-Marie, about this because it was their first baby. Just in Time was Guru Productions' first breakout show. They had done Paw Patrol, but this was their own. And I think they went all out because they have to build sets through history, and they have to redress that character, which is also expensive to every time Olive shows up. She's dressed as a foreman. She's dressed as a knight in medieval times, all of that. But they were a studio, an internal studio that did it. So I think that sort of gives you an idea of the two different kinds of budgets for portal shows. One where you have one place to go, another where you have different places.
And they did make that in the most affordable way they could by deciding to do that in 2D animation and not 3D animation. Right. Whereas Super Wings, I would say, would be the the Rolls Royce of preschool television in terms of what they do on that show. It's very ambitious, where they literally have to, because Jet, the delivery plane, is visiting a different country in every episode, or a different city in a different country in every episode. There's very little reuse, and so they are literally building 3D models because it's a 3D show for every set that Jet goes to, where for every episode. So it's a very labor intensive and has a big budget. That show. It's beautiful. It looks beautiful.
Oh, of course. It's gorgeous, that show. Yeah. And I agree, it is a Rolls Royce show.
Yeah.
I think that a word that is important to know is reuse. And reuse is a word that you'll get in your notes throughout your entire career as an animation writer, because directors will love you and crew will love you if you do more reuse. And reuse is instead of always creating new props, new couch, new this, just try to find a way to use what's in their library, what's called their library, because it is labor intensive. As Andrew says, it's expensive. They'll go balloon over their budget, and they rely on you to be imaginative within the constraints of reuse as much as possible. Now, they don't want to hold you back, but because creativity, sometimes you go all out and that's like a fantastic story. But that's sort of what we're talking about in Super Wings. There's no reuse in those sets. So I think as an up and coming writer pitching, I would try to look at that and make sure it's a little bit easier to sell, right? If you're Alex Barr, maybe you can sell something that has all those different sets. But I think when we're starting out, we should try to make it easier for them, because you're asking a lot to accept the conceit of the show itself. Do you have a company with you? And if you don't have those things, then I would keep it as modest as possible.
And that same note goes for animators as well. I know there are a lot of animators on the call who are either doing the best they can to write their pitch decks and relying a little more on the art, or they're partnering with writers to kind of bolster up their pitch deck on the writing side. So either side, if you're coming from the writing perspective or the art perspective, as much at this point, if it is your first or even second show, to kind of have your visuals be limited in kind of the cost and time, but expansive in terms of the worlds and stories. So it's kind of that dance that we're trying to dance. And particularly portal shows, right? Like if you go back to Harry or even Mika and Mo that we went into before, or the real world for this character, or it kind of, Mika and Mo originally had like a CGI real world, and then she dove into a felt world. And then the studio's decision was actually to have both worlds be felt. She was felt from the get-go. And part of that was in terms of cost and in terms of skill of the designers. If you kind of keep it all consistent, even if the rules of the world change, maybe the aesthetic doesn't change so much, or the color palette changes, but the medium doesn't change. So that's kind of one of the dances with portal shows too, because you automatically have an additional world because you have their real world.
Right. Okay.
Back to Super Wings.
Beautiful Super Wings you were talking about.
Yeah, so we have these slides in here, I think, just showing the two different types of show, right? 3D animation versus 2D. Right. And just again, to the point of if you're going to build, if you need an airport in Super Wings, that set has to be built virtually in a computer. So it's very labor intensive and very cost intensive. But the nice thing about 3D is it lends itself very well to toys, because there's kind of a toyetic look to it. So you can quickly, when you create a toy like there, it really does look like, I'm trying to get the reflection off there. It really does look like the character wonderfully that the kids know and love from the TV show.
And in terms of 2D and 3D, there are definitely studios that specialize in one or the other. Some studios do both. There are broadcasters that prefer one or the other, or even within the same broadcaster, it can be based on age group. Like for example, Disney, most of their preschool is 3D and most of their 6 to 11 is 2D. It's not 100% across the board, but there are things that to know. And as you prepare your pitch decks, please involve Animation Israel, and we'll kind of help steer you to where it goes to save time, energy, and money, but also in terms of reputation. For many Israelis, this is their first exposure to the world marketplace in this area, and the world marketplace first exposure to Israel. So let's collectively get off on the most educated and targeted and directed foot, so that we go forth looking like we have solid footing and know what we're doing.
That's great.
That's what we're here for. So.
Yes.
What a great resource. I mean, that's just terrific that you're doing that. I think that's fantastic.
Thanks,
and this is a show called Agent Binky. When I was showing you the floor plan, that was for this. This is a show I'm running with Hugh Duffy, who also worked with Andrew. This is a show about what do your indoor cats and pets think when they look outside. And with this, it's basically they think everything outside the window is outer space, and everything inside, they're in a space station, and their mission is to protect the humans from aliens. And of course, the aliens are bugs, vacuum cleaner, recliner chair. So they're on that mission to protect them. And this was based on a book, but you can see by Ashley Spires, I should say. You can see the 3D quality. You can see actually the fur on his little nose there and how specific that is, and the roundness. You can actually see it looks real on almost. So that's just a beautiful look, and that's 3D. Let's see what else we have here.
Oh, and here we are at 2D. So
2D.
Again, just to harken back to that, the simplicity of Mr. King with all of his white space around him.
Gorgeous. And then what else do we have here? And this is also, this is Ruby Gloom. This is a show I did earlier a few years ago. One of my first shows as a head writer. And it is flash animation, a gorgeous look with the director, Robin Budd, who does amazing work, an Emmy award-winning director. He took the book and not the book, the look of pictures in on T-shirts, because this was the difference between the usually you sell the show and then you get the merchandise. The merchandise of this one came first. And so then the show came based on designs on a T-shirt. And what was great about going 2D is you could just take Ruby, because she's flat, and just sort of move her like a theater into different places, and you can paint different sets in the background. So that's a 2D look that, just to give you an idea of what this is like. And she is a girl. Oh, here's the T-shirts.
Sorry,
No, that's okay. She's
did I jump the gun?
No, that's good, because you can see right there, Happily Never After. This was an older show. Obviously, we probably wouldn't get away with it now for preschoolers. But it's just a take on regular happiness. Really is, they call it gloomy in Gloomsville, but she's a happy girl. She dresses the way she wants. She's a trendsetter. She doesn't judge anybody. She's friends with ghosts, skeletons, two-headed guys, and it was just such a fun show. One of her sayings is, "Absence makes the heart go fonder, so get lost." It's that kind of edge to it. But you can see all the T-shirt designs, and and I'll show you this. I still have these. This is from many years ago. These are my Ruby Gloom gloves that I only wear rarely because I don't want them to get ruined. They're so cute. And this was a company in LA, Martin Hugh, I can never get his name right, Martin Hughes Design. And he designed all the T-shirts. And this really cool young couple in LA had this amazing company of T-shirts, and they were hot. And so we were flown down there, and they let us loose in the warehouse. And that was not a good decision on their part, because I was like piled up with tons of things, including those gloves I still have. But it really is quite amazing how stories can come from anywhere, right? Stories can come from a picture on a T-shirt. They can come from a saying, a goofy look on life. And that's what Ruby Gloom was. And that was flash animation.
And we have this in here because, this is to support that stories can come from anywhere. So like Carolyn says, that wasn't a book series. It wasn't even dreamed up as a TV series at all. No. Ruby Gloom was dreamed up as just a line of apparel. Right. And that spawned a TV show. And so for you out there creating, anybody looking to create a show, look around and see what possibilities there are, because and again, it ties into collaboration as well. Bring on a partner. Maybe there is a line of clothing out there with a great little character on it that's only been realized like that, and it's just waiting to be developed as a TV show. So, look, have your eyes open. In this case, Mr. King's Machine was the first book of the 3-book series by Geneviève Coté that turned into the remarkable Mr. King.
I'd say that your recommendation in terms of kind of stories are everywhere is particularly true for writers. So there are many writers who don't quite know where they get a designer, how to get the art, or are concerned about the budget that it involves to get the art. So if you essentially get the rights to or partner with a picture book series or or like Ruby Gloom, an existing property, something's already out there, you kind of instantly have art for your deck. I'm not saying that's the only way to go about it, but it is a way to go about it for writers, because otherwise you need to somehow get visuals for your deck. And we'll go into that more on week 4, but this picture is 1,000 words is very true. So writing the best pitch deck in the world, if it's just black and white lettering, isn't going to sell your show, particularly in this medium of animation. That's whether it's for preschool or primetime animation or 6 to 11. You're going to need to somehow acquire or partner or find visuals for your deck. So this idea of being able to leverage something that already exists in the marketplace, particularly something that has a degree of popularity, is a great one.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
And this slide just shows again how we touched on this already. It was about how the world in the TV show absolutely represents. It came from the book series and was sort of faithfully adapted for television.
Mm. Oh, and there's the book, Binky. Oh, this is I have one here too. This is by Ashley Spires. It's what the show is based on, and it's very different look than. As far as colors that they did, and the next slide will show you. Right, so those colors, very muted, almost sepia, black and white. In here is what Ashley, and she's also the graphic designer as well, or the illustrator and the writer. It's had to be adapted, but not very much. Like it was expanded into the actual television world, right? And so the retro mid-century designs, which I love, was just going through my mom's photo album and seeing all those. I saw those chairs and that lamp square. It's just such a nice aesthetic, and the director did a beautiful job of taking what she wrote and expanding it and translating into television. So it's living and breathing as we see it. So, and with bright colors there, there's my mom's curtains, and just really nice, beautiful kind of look that he took directly from the book and translated it, which I think is really exciting. Oh, and there's Mika and Mo. This is Amory, as you all know from the first session.
This is how Carolyn and I met, actually. My show got optioned by a studio, and they said, "Do you mind if we bring in Carolyn Hay?" I'm like, "Who's Carolyn Hay?" And then I'm like, "Oh," and I ended up liking her better than the studio even. Like she's great.
And so that's where history was made.
Yeah, we became buddies.
The creator, and I'm like, "Sure, I'll meet with the creator." And so she happened to be in Toronto, so we met, had lots of coffee, and here we go. What's great is the collaboration. If you can get with with the creator, like Alex Barr, like Amory, and they're as wonderful as those guys are, you're so lucky, because we went back and forth. Then we sent tons of stuff back and forth because she lives in LA and I'm in Toronto, so we couldn't always get together. But that was an amazing process. And that's just what Andrew was talking about with collaboration. Everything starts here, and then it just keeps getting better and better. And I love all the detail in the designs that you came up with, Amory, because even if you look at the titles, again, I like to look at every little inch of the design. And in Trucktown, it was all dirty, right, to represent it. In Mika and Mo, it's got the stitching on it. It's just so sweet. And you can see down below, and the house and the tree. And even the hot air balloon, how it's rounded a little bit, like just sort of curved, it looks like fabric. It looks like felt, and it's cushy and warm and sweet, and just a beautiful series. And what I love is, and so fantastical, she can pull pieces when she wants to create something. She pulls something from her environment to build, and whatever she needs. So I love that, because it's so creative, so imaginative, and
playful. There it is. It's playful, right?
Yeah. Right, exactly. You can do anything. And so that's what this show really hones in on, right? Is you can basically do anything as long as you want to and has the imagination. It's very crafty too, for all the little crafty. Very different kid that watch Mika and Mo than Trucktown. Trucktown kids are too busy getting dirty, rolling around in sand. The Mika and Mo kids are nice. They're ones that want to be creative and imaginative, I think.
And use clouds for hot air balloons and the roof of the house. So they use the cloud and the roof. They're the weirdo kids, not the dirty kids.
That's right. There's probably some crossover, but
Definitely.
we'll find them in season 3.
Well, there you go. And just so you know, and when I was going through the quick go through in terms of the pitch deck, this is what I mean by a title page. So you have, because this is the only thing here that has your tagline, your title, your credits, your studio if you have one, whether or not it's preschool, the length of the show. Like, see, there's information that they have on that very first image they'll see of your show. And sometimes that's the only image you have. Sometimes it's enough to be able to market your show. You have your characters and you have one background that represents your world.
Right. And the one line too, if you're fearless and made of felt, you're going to find yourself in some pretty sticky situations, which is just looks like one line. I think we probably worked on that for, months. Okay, maybe weeks. Okay, maybe. I'm sure. To get it down to that one squeeze down line, it's hard.
But it's how you know your world, though, right?
Right. It's made of felt. She's going to leap before she looks, and she's going to get into some trouble, which is going to be fun.
Yeah. So in terms of that tagline, it should have a snippet of your world and a snippet of your characters in it. And
that's right.
Show the soul of your show.
Yeah.
Right. And speaking of characters, I think we're moving into talking about our lead characters. This is Rob, of course, and he's what we call a kid in. And that means that he's going to be the lead guy or the lead girl that the viewer is going to see in themselves. They're going to either want to be him or they're going to want him to be their friend. So that's what we call the kid in. And there's always a kid in, even in an ensemble like Trucktown. Our kid in was Jack, the main truck. And so even though there was like 8 or 10 trucks, we had to have one just a little bit up front so that we know what his problem is. And he has a little bit of a pro-social learn. And we sort of follow that. Just so the kid viewers have an in and see what the next one is there.
And this is again, and you're going to show us the opening credits now from a bit of animation from Ranger Rob. And this will also show you what we did, the world. So this is the beginning of Ranger Rob, and it'll show you the world. You'll see the monorail, you'll see Chipper, you'll see Stomper, you'll see Rob's Ranger Tower. It all comes at you fast and furious in 30 seconds.
All right, you ready? 1, 2, 3, ta-da!
Nothing's happening. No, it's not playing. Oh, no. Do you need to go out of the PowerPoint, Anne-Marie?
You can't see it?
Nope.
Well, you got a good song.
No, we can't hear it either.
No.
It says you're viewing Anne-Marie's screen.
Sorry.
So maybe do you need to shrink that and then?
Here, well, can you see it now or still no?
No.
Hold on. Let's try this. I have one other trick, and if not, we are going to pretend we saw it.
Yeah, okay. Technology, huh? If only we could just be there in person.
I know.
All at my house. You can water my plants. Okay.
Here
we go.
Okay. So wait, and if I do it full screen, can you still see it? Let's see. Yes, everybody's happy?
Yeah, we are very happy.
Let's try it
cool.
out.
All right, let's try again. So I'm not just dancing to myself. Here we go.
Oh, mute. Can't hear it.
Can you hear it now?
Yep. No. Yep, just turn it up. Maybe. Well, you could see all the action.
Yeah, you could get the sense of the action. Here's his gear. Rob's putting on his gear there. He's coming out of his Ranger Tower here. There's the monorail.
Aren't they cute?
There's Chipper. There's Stomper on a Zodiac.
Getting into trouble again. Okay.
But that's fine for illustration. It just gives we don't need to get it working perfectly for today, but that just gives you a sense of the world in motion.
There you go. You got to lose that. There you go. I don't know why I'm telling her, because oh, you have to go in there. Wow. There we go.
It got disconnected.
Uh-oh.
I think she closed this. Ah, here she is. Okay.
There she is. Okay. How
Can
are you
you
doing,
hear me now?
Emery?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so you just need to get the
Not
power
hearing.
presentation up. We can actually keep talking while you get that up.
Absolutely.
We were going to talk, Andrew, about all the things we need to do with characters, find out their likes, their dislikes, their character traits, their foibles. And as much as we don't see a lot of the background of the characters, never in preschool, usually, because it's the time is just in the course of a day. We don't go into the backstory. It's really important to know your character through and through, so that we know exactly what Binky would say, what Mr. King would say.
Yeah, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. It's a great idea to do a chart for these things. Literally, strengths on one side, weaknesses on the other side, their quirks, their likes, their dislikes. And as you come up with these things and you come up with these charts for your characters, you'll see where you have story possibilities, because there'll be intersections where they, where someone's like is going to come up against someone else's dislike, and boom, you've got a story.
And that's what's fun, the conflict, finding their contrary natures, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so the other thing I wanted to say is that with preschoolers, you're never going, when I mentioned backstory, you're never going to go back in time, because that's too hard for a preschooler to understand. But because they won't, if you say 3 days ago even, it just doesn't work for them. But for us, we kind of go, okay, so where is this character from? How many siblings do they have? Is it a single parent? Is it this? Because then when we're writing it, those characters are fuller, even though nobody even hears about, Max and Ruby, the whole big interesting thing about them, where they didn't have parents for the longest time. I'm sure the creators knew all the backstory. They held some of that back. And it just helped develop those characters. And
it's like when we came up with Stomper, the Yeti, early on coming up with Stomper, we thought, oh, well, he's 5,000 years old. I mean, he's really, but he's like a kid, but he's 5,000 years old. And, but we never, in any of those 136 episodes we've done, have we ever talked about Stomper's actual age. But we have a sense of it, because it ties him into the world in terms of his knowledge about, like, he's been around the park a few thousand times,
Right.
He knows this place.
True. Yeah, the folklore that he brings of the Yeti folklore.
That's right.
We say it in the past, we say, well, we know that Yetis like grilled cheese. So, we don't tell the story about the old Yeti, the first Yeti of the blah, blah, blah. So that's just something to keep in mind as far as characters. We like to do all that work and then hide it, just put it under the rug, because you don't want to have too much exposition. But if we know it, it will come out in the character development.
That's right. And then in terms of rounding out your cast, you've got your lead. If you figured out who your lead is and who your kid in, as Carolyn has described it, then pairing them up with a buddy, as we've seen illustrated in Harry and his Bucket Full of Dinosaurs with the dinos, Just in Time with Squidgy, Rob with Stomper. Everybody, it's a very good idea to have a buddy that you pair your lead for preschool. So just it's something to bear in mind.
It really helps, because it gives that ability to have the conversation too when you're doing something, as opposed to the kid by himself. And you can for sure do that, Anne-Marie, because talking about characters, he had a buddy, Dan, Jack and Dan. The blue one is Dan and the red one is Jack. But when you look at the characters, you also have to look at their physicality, because if you look to the top, oh, you're so good at the
I'm not good at sharing my screen, but I'm good at pointing with the cursor.
Okay, 10 o'clock. That's Rosie. So how would you make Rosie different? So she's got a wrecking ball. What we came up with is, well, what would you feel like if you had a wrecking ball? Well, you'd be always out of balance. And so she's clumsy and she's banging into things and breaking things they just built by accident. So you just look at the physicality and run with it. Max there with the tongue out, he's like he's just all over the place and really crazy, and jumps up, and he can extend on his big tires there. And then Big Rig, which I guess is 2 o'clock over there, the big one, the blue one on the right, he only says 1 or 2 words like no or move or whatever like that. And he's very imposing, and he's a big rig. And so that's sort of what we did. We just
your handle for the fire truck, for the fire truck character, he wanted to be a superhero. He just saw himself as rescuing everybody and being a superhero. So that was always his runner.
That's right. And that gave us lots of stories, because every day he would try to be a different type of superhero. So, and then I think you'll see in the next, oh, sorry.
All right, so 2 things. So Andrew just used the term runner. I want to make sure that people in the audience know what that term is, if you want to get into what that means.
Sure. It's just that's just like it's kind of like a handle, or some kind of like it's a continuing joke. It's the thing that the audience will tune in on, and they just know that this character at some point is going to want to be a superhero. Whenever they see that character show up in the episode, the kids are going to delight, because they're going to think, oh, what kind of superhero is he going to want to be today?
Right.
Got it. So it could be a behavior, it could be a line, it could be something, but it's something that's a constant for the identity of that character.
That's right. And then in one episode, a runner can also mean a joke that is a gag that goes and usually hits. So if he wants to be one time we had him being a birthday hero. So at the first he wants to bring you cake. The second he'll want to do something else with a hat. And the third one he'll want to sing to you, something like that. But they're all gags and much funnier than I just described. But you'll just have to go with me on it.
You can't describe gags. And then another question in terms of characters. I know we've talked a lot about buddies. I'm sorry, my kids are making lunch right now. We talked about buddies and kind of like, you know, the odd couple buddies in particular, buddies who balance each other, buddies who contrast. But Trucktown I see is an ensemble cast. And to me, as a creator, looks like a fairly large ensemble cast. Do you have a recommendation in terms of kind of when creators are going out to pitch initially, how many characters, even for an ensemble cast, like would you go more than 3 or go more than 5 in? And because you need art, you need development, like how much would you put into an initial pitch?
I think that I wouldn't worry so much about that, in the sense that you can always put, as we said, even in this, you can put a couple frontline characters in front, like your 2 buddy characters and maybe Max as a third. Although we talked about budget, if you come from a series like Paw Patrol, Trucktown like this, you can't really get away with it without it. And I think that budget-wise, it's okay, because they build them and then they have them and they reuse them all the time, to use that term.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would worry about that. What do you think, Andrew?
Well, I would say though, if you're coming out and your first time, it's gonna be one of your first projects, and you're a writer or a studio, it's one of your early projects, try and keep it simple and try and keep the cast size down. And also, when you're writing the character descriptions, try and keep them simple. Like this is a page from the Mr. King Bible, which was an ensemble show, as we saw. Can you go back to that character, that Mr. King cast one, which is like early on in the slideshow? And so what I'm holding up here, that's 3 characters that are described on the page. And I'll read you the description that I wrote for okay, so there's Bert is the bear. He's standing there in the middle. And I'll read you this short description that I wrote for Bert. And you'll hear that I have his foibles in there. I have a bit of his voice in here. And you can see how he is going to interact in a story. So how he's going to feature in a story. So first of all, I have one little sentence above there, which is like this is kind of what would Bert sound like. So underneath Bert's name, it says, A bumbly bear knows that growing up is awfully hard work. So immediately you can go like, oh, okay, he's a bumbly bear and growing up is hard work. And then the 8 lines that describe him. Bert is the big kid who is bigger and stronger than everyone else. And he just started growing. Big-hearted, lovable bear, Bert has got a long way to go until he grows into his paws, which seem to have grown a lot faster than the rest of him. This means that while Bert may have the determination and patience, he doesn't always have the motor skills to go along with them. So he's always going to be stumbling. A voice of patience and stick-to-itiveness, Bert often speaks of himself in the third person. Maybe that's because the bumbly bear he is and the able bear he wants to be are quite different for now. But no worries, Bert, you're a lot further along the way than you think. So that kind of gives you just a taste of who he is.
That's so
and the tone of the show too. It's very
and the tone of the show, yeah.
You're further along than you think. Like
it's very encouraging. The sentences are short. Yeah, exactly. And that's important in your Bible. The Bible actually just be in the voice of the show. So it's not just a document where you're just, listing what your show is. The Bible actually have to have the voice of the show and the character of what you want, the tone of your show.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Andrew, you did say that before you read it, that you had a top line sentence. I know some Bibles have it, some Bibles don't, so it's not required. But something kind of when you have the name of your character, have like a saying or something that character may say that's true to character is a nice, quick and easy way to.
For sure. So with Ranger Rob, and that's kind of fun for Ranger Rob, we came up with I'm Ranger ready to get outside, saving the day the Ranger way. We have a bunch of them, right, Carolyn? What else do we have?
Right. Those are called catchphrases.
Catchphrases.
And, it's really great to have every character have their own catchphrase. Chase is on the case. That's a pretty famous Paw Patrol one. Everybody knows. And it often relates to the world. So in Trucktown, instead of saying, oh, nuts, they would say, oh, lug nuts when something went wrong. Or they might say, gritty gears, just something that relates to the world. So, and it depends on the character who says it. And I think that we're talking about Rob being a lead in, and then Jet and Ruby. And yeah, those again, these are called character poses. And this is further down the line in your development, but you can see all the differences of the characters that I was telling you about before. And you just take, physicality is so important in certain, especially in animation. You want to be able to get them to do gags and goofball things and just move. Characters standing there doing nothing is just going to die a very slow, painful death in animation. It's just going to be so dull. You want to make sure they're moving. There's gags. And on your page, when you see dialogue going down the page with no action in between, then you need to go back and say, okay, what kind of action can I infuse here? So that's just to show you the difference in the characters. And then I think the next picture, right, we were talking about the kid in, we talked about him.
Our aspirational lead.
Our aspirational character. And then Jet is the same. He is the kid in, right, Andrew, you would say?
Yep, and Jet's big thing in Super Wings is speed. He's the world's fastest delivery plane. Right. So he doesn't just fly with speed, he flies with jet speed.
And kids, you see, again, they want to be fast. So they love Jet. I bet they love Jet the best of all the characters. I'm sure that would come back in a lot of the testing. Mm-hmm. And then the next one is a female lead, which is my Ruby there that I love dearly. And again, it's somebody that a girl would like to be or like to have as her best friend. And she really is a good friend. As I said before, she's so open, so fun. And that's what gets a connection to your kid viewers. They kind of wish they were like that, or they wish they had someone like that in their life, and they can imagine it, sort of like using their imagination. And now that's great. And then we're going to go into buddies that we talked about. It's a Yeti buddy here. They're usually goofballs against the straight guy. Always works. It works in Seinfeld. It works in everything. You want to have a straight kid in for preschool, or in Seinfeld, he's just the straight, even though he's funny. He's not going to be the goofball like Kramer or George. And this is what we always work on in any character stuff with animation. It's great to have a buddy. And I think the next one is the same.
Second, Caroline and Andrew, do you do many things where it's actually flipped, where, like, say in this case, where you'd have the goofball Yeti as the lead and have the straight one as kind of more the voice of reason, or it tends to be kind of?
It's an interesting question. It's a great question. For preschool TV, generally you've got the character that is closest aligned to the viewer, because they have to see themselves in that role. So that's what aspirational means, seeing yourself in a role. So a viewer is not necessarily going to see themselves in the role of a goofy Yeti, but they're going to love hanging around with them. But they're going to see themselves as Rob. They're going to see driving the action as Rob, and the sidekick along for the fun and the giggles.
I think at the older 6 to 11, they'll have two leads that are both like goofy.
Yeah.
Right. Unicorn. I'm trying to think off the top of my head.
Go Away Unicorn.
Right. There you go. They're both two goofy unicorns trying to make the world a better place. They're do-gooders, but they're both really goofy. So the older you get, you can do that because they don't need that kind of grounded character so much. I think we've tried in some of our pitches earlier on. Andrew tried to switch that up. Hasn't really gotten.
No, it's very hard to land that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've got a couple other buddies we're showing here. Oh, there's just Stomper.
Stomper in his home in the Arctic, in the frosty fields.
And there is another great example, Anne-Marie's show, where the buddy situation is really cute because Mika is fearless. She'll leap before she looks. And we always like to say that Mo there, his MO is just to survive her enthusiasm. He is afraid. He's going to, the kids are going to relate to him. He's comically afraid, though. We don't make him sad sack. We just make him, oh, are you sure you want to do that? And then, of course, he goes along with his friend and he ends up in a bucket, head down, and he's fine with that. In the end, it's always going to be fun, right? So it's really fun to have that, the contrary nature of the two characters and the buddies, because you get away with a lot, and a lot of comedy comes from it. And then what do we have now? Oh, and this is, we're not going to read all this, but Andrew and I are working on a show that we're developing. It's a teen series, so you're not going to see this kind of dialogue in our other shows. But this is the kind of thing that we do that Andrew was mentioning earlier about charts. We put the name, we've got 5 core cast in characters in this show, and we put them on both sides, and then we run by dialogue what they would say about each other. And that's the kind of detail we will get to. And sometimes we put it in the Bible, sometimes we don't. We just do it for ourselves because we like punishment.
And this is done for two things. It's to hear the voice of the character and know how they will react and what they think about the other characters. And it's also to just look at your show and check out its gender parity equation and also its cultural parity equation, because you want this in your properties. You want cultural parity so that your global audience anywhere can see themselves reflected in some of the characters in your show. I think that's very important for it to be relatable and have a global audience. And also the male-female blend. So in this, we've got, the way this is laid out is we've got the top line across there. Tucker is a boy, Winston's a boy, Blythe is a girl, Kit is a girl, Haley is a girl. And then you go down the other side on the left side there, and that's just their name again. And where these things intersect, the boxes where they intersect is what they would say about the person whose box they're intersecting with.
Right.
So
we'll read a couple of those.
Yeah, just to give you an illustration.
Right. But what I wanted to just add too is something that we talk about, which is power parity. And even though you have the same amount of females or male, we like to make sure that the females aren't low status or aren't perfect, or they're the ones that come into the scene and just have the information, so they're very boring. I'd like to see more goofy sidekick characters that are female. And we've got one coming up in the new season of Ranger Rob, Bubbles, who is a goofy sidekick character to Marina. And we're seeing more of that. Oh, is that someone's children?
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay. That's so cute.
We'll finish this up and then we'll open for questions anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, great. So what we've done is we made Haley and Kit the leads. They're two girls. Haley's the really boppy girl. Fantastic. And Kit is really cool. Okay, so maybe
so we'll give you still a boppy, eager to please Haley. What would Haley say about Kit? She'd say, and I'm going to read the upper box there, so where Haley intersects with Kit. You know the friend that you're really, you know the friend that you're not sure is really a friend, but turns out she kind of like sort of maybe is one? Yeah, well, that's her.
Right.
And then it's what Haley would say about Haley. I think I just need to, I think I need to work on a few things. Like sometimes I'm overly sensitive. I'm a bit of a people pleaser. I can also be clumsy too. And I'm sort of paranoid. Am I saying too much?
Right. You've got it. You're cast.
Thank you.
So I'm going to read Kit, which is opposite. So again, we're kind of trying to pair those characters that will work really well together. What would Kit say about Winston? Annoying, spoiled, way too polite. Oh my God, don't tell me I'm crushing. So that kind of thing where, you know, the girl doesn't want to admit it. And she's now talking about, Kit's going to talk about Blythe, who's really uptight. What is her deal? My guitar's E string wishes it would be wound up as tight as she is. So I'm not you know, as good an actor as Andrew, but the idea is let's play around with how they feel about each other and what do they know about themselves.
Yeah, and this kind of chart is just great for dynamic. So, you know, you look at where Kit intersects with Kit, what she'd say about herself, none of your business is what she's going to say. So you know immediately how to write that character.
Right.
You know how to write that character and that she's going to be a bit of a pain.
Right. A fun pain.
Yeah, a fun pain. So that's just to give you an illustration of kind of like how you as the writer and the creator of a show can bring your characters to life without even so far like writing a script, because we haven't actually written a script for this show yet, but we know the voices that we're going to be including for those characters in that script, and we can visualize them in the context of stories.
Yeah, and that's exactly this perfect example, exactly what Disney was talking about on an earlier session. That's what they call the lemon test. Each character gets a lemon. What would the character do with that lemon? What would it say about it? What would, you know, it's the same thing. So you can do the same kind of chart for different situations as a way of discovery for your characters. I think it's great. Thank you so much for giving the visual example too, and the voices, the talk through. So thank you so much. This is great information about character and about world. And I know we've gone over a little bit on time, so I'd like to open it up. What'd you say?
I said, sorry, we got so into it. I think
it's great. I'd like to open up for questions. If anyone from the audience does have questions, I'm going to stop my share if I can. And hey, everyone's still there. And pop into the chat and see them, or unmute if you can see them, and if you want to handle the questions, that would be great. Otherwise, we know, just a quick plug. Next week, same bat channel, same bat time. Carolyn and Andrew have been kind enough. Originally, I thought they could each do a session, but they've worked together so much and they work so well together. So they wanted to do their sessions together. So next week will be about show structure and how to format your show and key elements, as well as stories. How do you create stories that are sustainable and that can last for multiple seasons? So they're going to get into those next week. And again, just if you want to drop a quick line to info@animationisrael.com if there's stuff that you particularly want to see or learn about. And also if you're interested in our workshop, where we will give you one-on-one feedback on your actual pitch deck so that you can be ready for market. I come from the writing background, and Amit comes from the design background. So that's where we are. And Amit, any questions coming through?
No, you were probably, actually, I spoke too soon. Yeah, okay, in superhero series, the world is usually just a city, which is kind of boring. It doesn't seem any effort is made to make them more interesting. I gather that they're talking this about like stereotypical series of kids where it feels like everything is a bit the same in a way. I mean, how do you, I would say the question is, how do you probably find the uniqueness in each of the
well I think if you're if your setting is in a city in a preschool show, you absolutely need to make that city exciting. So it can't just be, okay, well, we're in a city so it's boring. You have to come up with very inventive places for the kid to hang out. Maybe if it's a kid superhero, they have a secret lair, a headquarters that you access through a sliding pole or a rope or a slingshot or something cool. You just got to come up with the cool way into that world, and you got to feature that world in great ways. Super Wings is another great example, set all over the world, and the action that goes on in that show, it's set in, one episode set in Paris. They're going to do amazing things with the Eiffel Tower. They're going to do incredible things at the Louvre. So you've got to take opportunity. You've got to take your opportunities and build on them.
I think it's also part of the characters, like the theme of that specific characters. With the Paw Patrol, for example, the cars and the city is very, how you say, approachable for puppies. But when it comes to Super Wings, so for example, their headquarters is available only to, you fly up there, don't you? It's like you need to. So there is a lot of things to play with within that world, within that the cityscape. So that is certainly something you can work with. Okay, another question is, in some of these episodes, there are specific moments that repeat themselves throughout the episode. That are a part of a similar structure. How important is that?
Very good question. It's very important for preschool because kids look for those moments. And to use Paw Patrol as an example, they do a great one, a really good conceit, which is he has to pick his pups. And I know that the kids are probably waiting every day when they watch it. Which pup are they going to choose? Is he going to choose this time? And when he chooses it, they come, first of all, they call them, and he calls them, and then they come up, right? You probably have a little one. Right. And then they go down the slides, another aspirational thing. And then they all gather and get gear. It's called the gear up moment. We all have
and we're definitely going to get into that in next week's discussion. That's part of our structure element is coming up with those. It's one of the most fun things is coming up with your repeatable moments.
Right. And then it's so great when you're writing a script because you go, oh, yay, I made it to the repeatable. Now I can.
And it's great for budget. So on that, since it sounds like we're already touching on material that we're going to get into next week, get more on repeatable moments next week, as well as show structure and story. Andrew and Carolyn, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. You are very kind to bring your expertise to Israel. And we will see you next week. And thank you all who attended. Look forward to continuing the discussion.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks so much, Emery. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.